I'm Varshini Jagarajan from Polytechnic Unkuama.
Hi, I'm Jivitra.
Hi, I'm Nagashubhashini.
Let's take a look on the figure given in the case study question. Question 1. The conference credentials were compromised by email phishing. Please propose at least 2 security mechanisms to guard against email phishing. How to recognize a phishing email? Spotting a phishing email comes down to pointing out anything inconsistent or unusual. Sometimes it's difficult to recognize what's genuine and what's phishing attempt. First, you'll want to be sure that you slow down before opening any links, attachments, or sending a reply. Here's an example of how you should react if you receive a suspect email. You receive an email politely requesting a donation for victims of the most recent hurricane to make landfall. The sender's domain reads helpushurricanesurvivors.net, and though the organization could be legitimate, you haven't heard of it. Secondly, usually your spam folder shows you from this kind of emails, but for some reason this one is sitting at the top of your inbox. Third is you are computer savvy and you are not taking chances with any email from an organization that's asking for personal and financial information. This is especially true when you didn't request it and can verify its identity. Fourth is by taking a pause instead of taking immediate action, you have taken an important step to protect yourself. However, you have still got to determine if this is legitimate or a scam. What does a phishing email look like? One of the reasons phishing emails are so sinister and unfortunately often successful is that they are crafted to look legitimate. Generally, the following features are common among phishing emails and should raise red flags: attachments or links, spelling errors, poor grammar, unprofessional graphics, unnecessary urgency about verifying your email address or other personal information immediately, and generic greetings like "Dear customer" instead of your name. Hackers often rush to get phishing sites up, so some of them will look significantly different from the original company. You can use this phrase to pick a malicious email out of your inbox. Here are a few security mechanisms to always take with your emails and other communications. Firstly, employ common sense before handing over sensitive information. When you get an alert from your bank or other major institution, never click the link in the email. Instead, open your browser window and type the address directly into the URL field so you can make sure the site is real. Secondly, never trust alarming messages. Most reputable companies will not request personally identifiable information or account details via email. This includes your bank, insurance company, and any company you do business with. If you ever receive an email asking for any type of account information, immediately delete it and then call the company to confirm that your account is okay. Third, do not open attachments in these suspicious or strange emails, especially Word, Excel, PowerPoint, or PDF attachments. Fourth, avoid clicking embedded links in emails at all times because this can be seeded with malware. Be cautious when receiving messages from vendors or third parties. Never click on embedded URLs in the original message. Instead, visit the site directly by typing in the correct URL address to verify the request and review the vendor's contact policies and procedures for requesting information. Fifth, keep your software and operating system up to date. Windows OS products are often targets of phishing and other malicious attacks, so be sure you are secure and up to date, especially for those still running anything older than Windows 10. Question 2. The stolen credentials alone are not enough to access the company's POS devices. The hackers then acquired elevated rights that allow them to navigate company's network and to deploy malware. This process is called privilege escalation. Name as many ways as you know to do privilege escalation. During a penetration test, rarely will the tester get access to a system with the administrator privileges in the first attempt. You are almost always required to use privilege escalation techniques to achieve the penetration test. This figure shows dumping the SAM file using GSE-dump. Second is DLL preloading. Utilizing a combination of DLL preloading vulnerability and having access to network shares, a pen tester could look for a widely utilized share folder where users actually execute certain applications from. Once this shared folder is found, the pen tester could replace one of the legitimate DLLs by a specially crafted malicious DLL. There are already some countermeasures to this attack being applied by different software vendors, however, it is always worth a shot. Third is sensitive information stored in shared folders. Shared folders can be very useful while doing a penetration test. The main reason is because it is quite common to find sensitive information being stored in those shared folders with either a few restrictions or none at all. Fourth is weak permissions on processes. If you are in a system with high privileges, you will probably might want to take a look over the services running in that computer and check what users are running those services. There is always the possibility to inject a malicious code in one of those processes and with that retrieve privileges from the process owner such as a domain administrator.
Question 3. For privilege acceleration, the hackers need to do vulnerability scanning on the target network. Please propose as many ways as you know to do vulnerability scanning. There are many types of vulnerability scanner which perform different security tasks and cover off a range of different attack scenarios. The main different types of vulnerability scanner you will see will be network-based vulnerability scanners, agent-based vulnerability scanners, web application vulnerability scanners, and authenticate vulnerability scans. Network vulnerability scanners. Network vulnerability scanners are so called because they scan your system across the network by sending probes looking for open ports and service and then probing each service further for more information, configuration weakness or known vulnerabilities. The way this work can differ. You might install a hardware appliance inside your network or deploy a virtual appliance on a virtual machine and then run scans from the machine against all others on the network. Internal versus external. Network scanners are often configured either to scan internal network or external network. As a general rule of thumb, the larger and more complex your private network becomes, the more important it will be to also consider employing an internal network scanner that can check your internal system for weakness that could lead to compromise of a single system turning into a wider breach. Small organizations with a much more modern digital footprint may not decide to put internal scanning in place earlier on, such as those with all their server in the cloud and a simple private network for internet access only. However, this organization would still benefit for agent-based internal scanning so that vulnerabilities on employee device can be identified for patching. Next, external network scanning. An external vulnerability scan is simply one which scans your system from the outside. What this really means is the scanner probes come from an untrusted internet address which is outside of any of your organization private network. They stimulate the activity of a remote attacker looking at which system and service are offered over the internet and start by looking for vulnerabilities on the internet exposed system. Although the amount of information that can be discovered by these scans can be limited compared to the other types described below, they can also be very relieving in understanding what attacker can see. Some vulnerability scanners are well set up deal with this situation and have ready in the cloud, so no deployment of management of your own system are required. They are simple point and click. Internal network scanning. Internal network vulnerability scan are designed to find weakness on systems which do not expose ports or service to the internet. This kind of vulnerability scanning helps to cover off a range of attack scenarios which could not be scanned for by external vulnerability scanners. For example, if an outdated version of Firefox browser is in use on a company laptop, the machine could not be vulnerable to attack if a user is convinced to visit a malicious website. Next, agent-based scanner. Agent-based scanning is performing by installing lightweight software scanners on each device to be covered, which can run local vulnerability scan and report back to a central server with result. In the same way of authenticated network scan, this type of scanner can pick up on a wide range of vulnerabilities, including weakness in software which do not expose ports or service for the remote access at all. Example, a vulnerable version of a Firefox. Context-aware scanner. Some scanners can be used to check for weakness both from an external and internal perspective, but not all are able to report issue in context of where the vulnerability was found. Many scanners that are equipped to perform internal and external scan neglect to highlight security issue which arise from technology which should not normally to external expose. Next, web application scanner. Web application vulnerability scanners are a specialized type of vulnerability scanner which focus on finding weakness in web application and website. Traditionally, the work of crawling through a site of application in a similar way as a search engine would, sending a range of probes to each page or form it finds to look for weakness. Many vulnerability scanners include web application scanning as part of their offering, although it can be licensed separately. They are generally good at identifying straightforward weakness, such as simple SQL injection of and cross-site scripting flaws. Unauthenticated and authenticated vulnerability scan. Unauthenticated scans like external scan search for weakness in the network perimeter, while authenticated scans provide vulnerability scanners with various privileged credentials, allowing them to probe the inside of the network for weak password, configuration issue, and misconfiguration database of or application. Question 4. Many POS machines on the market nowadays are vulnerable to virus and malware. Please propose a few measures to enhance POS security. First, install antivirus on the POS system. This is a simple and obvious solution for preventing POS attack. If you want to ensure harmful malware does not infiltrate your system, install endpoint protection software on your device. These tools will scan the software on your POS device and detect problematic files or apps that need to be immediately removed. The software will alert you to trouble areas and help you to begin cleansing process required to guarantee the malware does not result in data theft. Keep POS software up to date by installing software updates, which often contain important security patches implemented as a result of newly discovered vulnerabilities. Patch management is critical for a secure system. Run antivirus software continuously, periodically scanning system for malicious files. Second, lock down your system. Although it's highly unlikely that your employee will use your POS device for verification purpose, there is still plenty of potential for inside job or even just human error that to cause massive trouble. Employee can steal device with POS software installed on them or accidentally leave the device at the office or in a store or lose the device. If the device are lost or stolen, anyone who can access this device and the software will be able to view and steal customer record. To ensure that your company does not fall in the victim this kind of theft, make sure to lock down all your devices at the end of the workday. Account of all devices each day and secure them in a place which nobody but a selected few employees has access. Always use complex, secure password and two-factor authentication. Third, avoid connecting your POS to external network. The most dangerous hackers that compromise system remotely and do not need to be retail location in order to siphon away valuable business and client information. Systems that connect to external network are more susceptible to attacks from hackers. Some who may have infiltrated in external system with software that lays dormant until they connect with a POS. Consider keeping things internal and secure. Use a corporate network to handle critical tasks like payment process. Implement application whitelisting. which allows only necessary application to run on a post system. Any apps that might normally at risk, like web browser or email, are blocked, thus preventing malware infection through this channel. Monitor all activity in post system and data for any anomalous activity and indication of threat. Segment any network utilized by post system. Fourth, maintaining the post up-to-date post software. Post software updates often include important security patches that, if not installed, can leave your post system vulnerable to malware and other attacks that could put your data at risk. Downloading and installing updates in a timed manner will keep post network and hardware far more protected than choosing to do updates quarterly or some other schedule.
Question 5. Target admitted that they ignored many alerts from their network security devices because of alert overload. If you are the target CTO, what would you do to alleviate the problem of alert overload? First, the right of data for the right people. Another way to make sure you're getting optimal results from your sensors is to make sure the right incident notifications are going to the right people. Platforms like PagerDuty let you specify an order of command of handling different types of events. Rather than blanketing your whole team with incident notifications, make sure only the exact right people who need to handle issues get woken up. This minimizes unplanned work and alert fatigue in responding to issues. You can also configure PagerDuty to send notification to a larger group if the initial recipient doesn't respond in a certain amount of your time. Second, get more out of logs. Keep in mind that there are lots of different ways to deal with information. One way is to generate alerts, but another is to log analytic tools to identify trends that stretch across a large amount of data collected by various monitoring tools. By boiling your log results down to essentials, you can figure out what you should paying attention to without having to handle a huge number of events on an individual basis. Third, turn off the alarms you don't need. Review the alert logs and shut off alerts that are chronically false alarm or false positive. Google site reliability engineers have an alert or ticket or log system in place to minimize alert overload. Your brain will appreciate the break from reacting to unnecessary notifications. The three possible responses to a false alarm are to turn off the alarm, turn off all alerts off, or turn the alert off entirely. Fourth, use smart alarms to quickly get to the root cause of an alert. When your phone blows up with notification at 3 a.m., you don't want to spend an hour poking around to fix the problem. Smart alarms not only tell you you have a problem, but also suggest ways to fix it and help you identify the root cause. Smart alarms also provide historical data about the event, so you know what happened immediately before and after the alert was triggered. Fifth, prioritize your alerts to identify the most urgent issues. All alerts are not created equal, so it's important to configure your SQL Server performance monitoring tool so that it only sends alerts for the most important issues. By prioritizing alert based on several levels, impact to the business or customers, and whether immediate action is required, you eliminate some of the noise generated by alerts that aren't critical. Focus on setting up alerts for issues that can cause your servers to go offline, severely corrupt data, or result in significant data loss.
Sixth, manage alarms by applying specific thresholds and rules. Setting thresholds and rules is a huge sanity saver because it will help you avoid being bombarded by multiple alerts in a short span of time. When you define performance threshold, SQL Server holds off on notifying you until a value of specific metric reaches a concerning level. For example, free disk space or free physical memory levels are dangerously low. These frees up DBAs to work on other tasks without constantly monitoring metrics. Setting rules of alerts lets you customize actions such as how frequently you want to be notified. For example, you could set SQL Server to only send notification when a specific alert has been triggered 4 times or if the alert contains a certain database object or username. Question 6. The security expert criticized Target for failing to isolate sensitive sections of their network from those more easily accessible to outsiders. If you are the Target CTO, please propose a flexible solution to segment and categorize your networks and resources. First, be cautious on over-segmentation. While isolating the individual asset on your network is an excellent cybersecurity strategy, there is such thing as too-much segmentation. When a network is too heavily segmented, it can be harder to manage and even affect the network's performance, which impact employees' productivity. Locking down each endpoint in the network with the heaviest possible level of restriction might make the whole network more secure, but it would be far too resource intensive and impractical for most organizations. Second, conduct regular network audits. You cannot properly isolate and protect what don't know you have. Regular network audits are a necessity for any defense in-depth strategy. Otherwise, you run the risk of missing some endpoints and connection on the network, creating security gaps that an attacker might be able to exploit. Conducting frequent network audits to identify any new asset that have been added to the network is one of the most effective network security best practices for closing security gaps in your organization. So be sure to carry out them frequently. Third, consolidated similar resources on one database. When preparing to enact a network segmentation strategy, it can be helpful to not only audit all the data on the network but also consolidate similar resources and data on individual databases. This helps you to enact a policy of least privilege more easily and protect extra sensitive information more readily. For example, say you have a customer data that only need to be accessed a very small number of or in your organization. Rather than having data sitting or dozens of workstations, it would be better to consolidate all of onto a single, well-protected database to increase security. Fourth, assign one person or small group of tracking cardholder data flows. Any good project start with a rock salt team and your network segmentation mission is no different. Assign one person or a small group of staff members who is responsible for learning all the places where cardholder data flows throughout the network. By placing this responsibility in the hands of one person, ideally he or she can track this information more easily and consistently. This one person becomes the expert on the overall flow of cardholder data as well as where, how it is used and stored, therefore reducing the scope of the CDE.